When we were kids, there was nothing better than hearing a spooky urban legend to make us feel scared. As adults, we're disappointed to learn that these accounts are usually fiction, stories made up to entertain us and nothing more. But that's not where these tales end. Dig a little deeper and you'll find that among the countless urban myths in existence, some of them are actually based on true events. Events that are far more frightening than any fiction. Here are 5 urban legends that turned out to be true, Part 2. The Gravedigger. The story of the Gravedigger is based on something that actually happened. The story goes like this. Late one night, a gravedigger was doing his rounds walking through a cemetery, ensuring that all was well. Through the black night, he began to hear a faint whisper coming from somewhere nearby. The graveyard was otherwise empty, and as this gravedigger followed the voice, the hair stood up on the back of his neck. The voice grew louder, and it soon became clear that it belonged to a young girl. She was saying, "Help me, help me, help me," over and over again. The gravedigger soon found the source of the voice. It was coming from a grave. Standing next to the tombstone and reading the dates, the gravedigger asked loudly, "Did you die in September?" The voice of the girl replied, "I was buried in September, but I've never died. Help me, I'm alive." The gravedigger then shook his head and said, "It's now August. Whatever you are, you can't possibly be alive." He then left the grave untouched and walked away as the girl's screams faded into nothing. Variations of this story have been told again and again, but what makes it truly sinister is that similar events actually did happen. During the 19th century, exhumed graves showed bloodied scratch marks on the underside of some coffin lids. Soon, doctors agreed that people were being buried prematurely, some of them alive and then waking up, screaming for their lives and scratching at their underground prison until their fingertips wore down to the bone. The candlelight prowler. Around the early 2000s, a new urban legend began to be shared among kids. Online and in the schoolyard, some children would whisper quietly about the candlelight prowler and how someone they knew from a different school had encountered this individual. The story was that children from around the country were being visited by an ominous figure in the night. Each child would lie in their bed and hear footsteps slowly walking down the hall towards their room. The door handle would turn and the door would creak open. Something would glow from the doorway. It was a tall man holding a white candle. He would then slip into the room and close the door behind him. The man would stand in the corner and watch the child in bed. He would look at their breathing. He would watch as their chest raised and fell. He would look at their eyes for just the slightest flicker. If he thought the kid in bed was awake, he would move towards them and carry out unspeakable acts. And so each child would pretend to be asleep. He or she would lie there for hours, knowing that each breath or slightest movement would give away that they were awake. Once the candle burned down to the man's hand, he would then leave the house. When the child's parents entered the room, drops of candle wax would be found on the floor. The candlelight prowler was in fact a real man. He was a child predator by the name of Darren James McDonald, who did indeed terrorize children as they slept while carrying a white candle with him to light his way. The ghost of Malay. In Europe, there's an urban legend about a strange figure haunting woodlands around towns and cities. Each story starts with a man or a woman walking through the woods at night. As they walk along a path, the trees feel more oppressive than usual. Just on the periphery of their awareness is a sound. It's unclear at first, but soon it comes into focus. It's the sound of footsteps moving across uneven terrain. Twigs and branches snap beneath them. Long grass rustles as something moves just out of sight, and they always match the speed of the person they're stalking. If the person stops, so too do the footsteps. If the person runs, they keep up. Then, finally, a shape emerges from between the trees. It's a man dressed in an old-fashioned boiler suit. Over his face is a gas mask, and in his hand is a large serrated knife that glistens with blood. The killer then hunts down his prey until he adds even more blood to his blade. It sounds like a movie, but the origins of this story come from what has been called the ghost of Malay. For over a decade, the town of Malay in Switzerland was the source of frightening stories. In the nearby woods, a man dressed in a boiler suit and gas mask terrorized passerbys. When an amateur photographer finally took a photograph of the man and published it in a local newspaper, the ghost's strange clothing was found abandoned in the woods. But the man was never apprehended, and due to a cryptic note also found in the woods, some believed he killed himself somewhere in the wilderness. The Slave Master. There have been many stories about a sinister figure going by the internet handle Slave Master. The rumors about his existence have persisted for well over 20 years, and there's no sign of the rumors diminishing. And nor should they, because the Slave Master urban legend is based on a real person. The stories usually take the form of a woman curious about experimenting with S&M, perusing chat rooms from the dark web. There, the woman is soon contacted by a man calling himself Slave Master. He persuades the women that he will fulfill their fantasies in a safe environment. He picks the woman up and drives her out to some farmland where he lives. There, in a room miles away from anywhere else, he persuades her to let him tie her up. But as soon as she's tied up and helpless, the real terror begins. She soon realizes that the slave master isn't there to fulfill her fantasies, but his own. He then brutally injures and eventually kills the woman, keeping her body in a metal barrel. This urban legend has always been a warning to the curious, so that people are wary about those that they meet up with in real life. And they should be wary. The real slave master is a man called John Robinson. The urban legend grew after he was arrested for brutalizing 2 women that he met in an internet chat room. Somehow, the women escaped, and after the disturbing calls to the police, law enforcement soon searched the land Robinson owned. They found several bodies in metal canisters. He has since been linked to many more violent murders. The House of Blood. The House of Blood urban legend sounds like something straight out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The story revolves around a married couple and their 2 young children. One day the mother rises early and starts preparations in the kitchen for a big meal that very night. The husband asks the wife what the occasion is, and she simply answers with, "I just want to have a nice family dinner." Later that day, the wife tells the children to go upstairs and play while she prepares the meal. That's when she slits the throat of her husband, skins his body, and then chops up the meat, putting it into a large pot with other ingredients. She then cleans up the mess and invites her children down for their family meal. She makes an excuse about their father having to rush off to work to deal with some event. Then the wife sits back and happily watches as her children unknowingly eat what remains of their own father. The truth behind this legend is that in February of the year 2000, Catherine Knight butchered her partner. Catherine worked at an abattoir, and she used all of these skills to remove the head and chunks of meat from the body. Luckily, her despicable crime was discovered by a neighbor who saw blood on the outside door. When the police arrived, they found Catherine's partner's head cooking in a pot and saw that the table had been set for 3. In front of each plate was the name of the murdered husband's children. Catherine was going to feed them their own father, perhaps even feasting on him herself. Thank you so much for watching this video, and remember to catch me live every single day on Twitch at twitch.tv/MatthewSantoro, and be sure to join my Discord at discord.gg/MatthewSantoro. Both communities are amazing, and I promise you'll absolutely love it. I'll see you over there and in the next video.